All right, we're live with Adam Hergenrother. My brother loves reading introductions, so I'll let him introduce you. Unless you,
Can I not read the intro? Can I give
Yeah,
you?
absolutely not. I hate introductions.
Can I give you my introduction?
Sure,
It's gonna be good, man. I did the same thing for Ivan Meisner. Do you know who that is?
No, I don't.
He's the founder of BNI,
Oh,
and
cool, awesome.
and they sent me his whole bio, and I think it's awesome. But people can read about that.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'll just tell you what I think of the guy. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm super pumped. We have Adam Hergenrother on the Modern American Dream podcast. And let me just tell you how we came to know the person. We think he's a super cool guy, young, athletic, fit. I feel like from my perspective, it looks like he has a good family life, good life with his kids. And I think that's the most important. The way we got to meet him is through our real estate career. He's obviously a leader and a super awesome entrepreneur, has an amazing real estate team amongst like other companies, like building company, and mostly based out of Vermont. I believe that's where you guys are from, right? And super cool dude. If you follow him and YouTube him and listen to some of the interviews that he puts out, his energy is always high. And he's always teaching other people how to be more successful. We actually met him one time in person. We have a picture to prove it. And he taught a class. And I think you're one of these guys that, I don't know if you're older than me or not, but I'm assuming we're somewhere in the same age range. And we look up to you as a person that, hey, if we can have a little bit of the way you're doing things, we'd probably be more successful. And I think anybody listening to our podcast, if you can implement a little bit of what we're going to talk about, you're probably going to be super successful. And I think that's awesome. That's Adam. There's probably a million things that you've accomplished that I did not mention, but that's what you are to us, to me. So,
I'm gonna post it in the show notes on the podcast so they could read it. You also have your own podcast, correct? What's the name of yours?
I do. It's called Business Meets Spirituality. It's a little bit, we do a little bit different type of thing on it, but I also, well, thank you for that intro and for sharing that. I appreciate it. Also, thank you guys for taking the time to have people on your podcast, whether it's me or anybody else, because, you know, all forms of teaching is going to help somebody regardless of who it is. And so I know how much time and energy goes into putting these things on. Not everyone does. So thanks for doing what you're doing, guys.
Yeah, definitely. So let's just jump right in and get started. The first question I have for you is, when did you get started in real estate and building your companies?
Well, so I guess it kind of goes back to college. You know, when I was in college, I bought my first piece of real estate. I was, and it's actually an important part of my life that not everyone hears this journey. When I was a freshman in college, towards the end of my freshman year, I had a roommate who was a roommate but didn't go to school. So anybody have one of those that like kind of lived on your couch and whatnot? But he's actually done extremely well now and successful. But he owned a car dealership, and him and his dad did. And like later on that semester, he came to me and he said, "Hey, I got this car that we can buy for probably about $1,000, and I think we can fix it up, and we'll fix up the parts on some credit, and then I think we can sell it and probably make like $500 or $600." And I was like, you know, at the time I maybe had like $600 in my bank account, and he's like, "I need $500. And so I was like, that's a lot of money. And I was like, but he's like, "Trust me, I think we can do this in like a week and a half." So I was like, okay. So I wrote the check out to him. We got the car, he fixed it up, and we ended up making like $2,000 in profit in like literally like a week. And he came back and he's like, "Dude, we just made $2,000 in profit." He gave me back my original $500, and we kept the $2,000, and we used that to forward the business. It's important because for a couple of reasons. One, it was my first taste of actual leverage, meaning I never saw the car. I never did any of the work to the car. I invested into a person, and I invested into a product that then turned the product into additional money. Then I kept rolling that $2,000 over the next 6 or 7 months. We ended up making about $120,000, $130,000 in that period of time, then split. So we each made like $60,000 or $70,000. That's actually what I used to buy my first investment property. However, I also learned about contracts then, because once we hit a certain number of profit, he goes, "I don't really need your money anymore. So you know what? Thanks. This has been great. I'm going to go ahead and start buying these cars without it." So I learned the value of contracts too. But anyways, it was a great start. I grabbed that money, And then I rolled into an investment property from there. And then basically, interestingly enough, I graduated in 2004. In 2005, I had a note called on me. I don't know if anybody's ever had a note called on them. It was the investment property that I bought. And obviously the market was rising and raising up at 2005. And we were renting it. It was it was supposed to be an owner-occupied condo. And I didn't really know all the terms. I bought it in college, so I didn't really know all that stuff going on. And they're like, yeah, you can't be renting this. And I was like, well, I'm renting it. And then finally, like a year later, they said, we are going to call your note because you didn't rectify this. And actually was this company called CTX Mortgage. If anybody's ever heard of them before, they went out of business during that time. But they actually called my note and they forced the sale. So I ended up selling it. It's actually pretty interesting about life, though. I ended up selling it in mid-December of 2005. It ended up being the highest sale in that condo complex all the way up until 2014. Because after my sale, 2006 hit Vermont and obviously everywhere, and it started going backwards. So what I thought was like the worst thing that was happening to me of having to sell this thing actually ended up being the best thing. So it's also a great value and lesson in life that, look, life is a dance and she's always in the lead. The only time it feels like we're not is when we fight reality. And so that's kind of my entry into real estate, my entry into leverage, and then also my entry into understanding that life is always in the lead and it's just a dance and you might as well hold on.
Wow, that's a cool story. How old were you when you would flip that first car?
I was probably 22, 21.
So young. And how old were you when you bought your first house?
So I bought that when I was 22 or 23. I bought that first. And I was renting a place and bought my first investment property. I was still renting a place when I could have lived in that condo unit. I just wanted to rent it. And I was living in a basement of my brother's place. And I say basement, this wasn't like a finished basement. This was like, there was two people down in this 800 square foot home. One guy actually had a room. Mine was like, I had a sheet by the furnace so that the furnace was like protecting me, like a sheet was going to do it. And I had another sheet on the other side and a sheet as my door. And that's how I lived. And I just didn't care about that as much. And I put my money into investments starting from there. And so it wasn't until probably 2007 that I actually bought my first house. I owned several pieces of real estate, but I had always lived in small rentals and then used my money to actually invest in the real estate before I bought my first place.
My brother lived in a basement next to a furnace for a while too.
A couple basements for sure.
Yeah, that's exciting.
That's awesome. So, and now you are where you are, right? You have all these amazing companies. And when you look back between now and that time when you were a college kid, what do you think are some of the things that you may have done right? Was it pure luck? Do you ever think back like, holy crap, I can't believe I'm where I am and like how the cards fell? Or do you think that you like intended every single day to fall the way it fell, you know?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the only thing that I did well was fail. If I could summarize it in that word, I have no idea I was going to be here. When I left, I took a job as a commercial underwriter. And so I started underwriting real estate deals and I was making $32,800 a year doing it. And I started underwriting in the first 90 days. I was underwriting all these commercial deals for real estate. And I'm sitting there going, I would underwrite them. Then I'd meet these people and I'm going, dude, these people are like, they're not like superheroes. Like, it's just like we have this fallacy somehow, like these people making money are better than us somehow. At least that's how I interpreted things back then. Yeah. And I was like, wow, I meet these people and I'm like, shit, this person can do it. Like, I definitely can do it. And that's anytime I speak, I hope people realize like, hey, if Adam can do this, I can do this. Right. And so I started underwriting these deals and within a short period of time, I was like, I never wanted anybody to ever put a limit on my thinking. And I remember being in a job, every moment I had somebody putting a box on my thinking. And so ultimately what I'm doing is, I remember one moment I had a file and I underwrote it and then I went to my boss and I gave it to her. And this was the tipping point. When I gave it, this was like 4 or 5 months into my job. First job ever. First real job. I worked at McDonald's when I was 14 and stuff like that, but first real job. And then I gave it to her and she looked at me and she said, hey, you know what? You took a day and a half to do this. You're making us all look bad. And you need to make sure that this file lasts you an entire week. And at that moment, I realized I was never going to be rewarded for results. I was going to be rewarded for basically sitting in a desk and making the time go by. And I remember walking back from here, and there's this big area, there's open floor, there's all cubicles. And I'm like, these people have been here 10, 15 years, and they're just miserable being here. And I'm like, this is not how I'm going to live my life. From the beginning, I never wanted a life that I was trying to get away from. I never wanted a job I wanted to end at the end of the day to get out of it. And I never wanted to build a business that I was trying to sell. And so ultimately, that's just how I approach things. And so I started creating, I left that job and ended up getting into real estate right after that. And I just remember from that moment, I was like, I just remember if I could just go make the amount of money that I was making, like 50 grand, and I had my own ability to think the way I wanted to, I would be happy. And of course, that those numbers increase over time, but I was just so excited to be able to go out and think that way. I just wanted to have the freedom of thinking and not having anybody put a limit there. And that was kind of the catalyst for me for jumping into real estate. Got it.
And then once you jumped into real estate, you became pretty successful pretty quickly. How many houses did you sell your first year?
So it's interesting. This was mid 2006 when I got into it. Everybody told me that I was crazy. Even my parents tried to encourage me, not because they didn't want me to succeed, just because the whole market was crashing. Like it was all the conversation, right? And it'd be like trying to buy it'd be like somebody telling you to go out and buy like a mall right now. Like that'd be crazy, right? So it's people were just kind of discouraging me. And I said, you know what? I'm going to prove to everybody that by surrounding yourself by more intelligent individuals and by putting my head down and blinding out the rest of the world and doing what I had to do, that I was going to prove that I could be successful. So I left the job, and I remember I went to work at Remax, and I didn't have an office, and I had to work out of a 400 square foot apartment. And so the first 30 days I was there, I had no idea what I was doing. I just literally lead generated nonstop. And I mean lead generate, I don't mean just picking up the phone. I would make cupcakes and carry them around to people and knock on their doors. Like people think about now, like, wow, doing that. And sometimes because I've been out of production for so long, people think that I didn't sell real estate. And I said, look, I actually worked harder and sold more real estate than most people do in 3 years in their entire life. In the first 30 days I was in real estate in the worst market, I put 3 homes under contract. The first 30 days starting my career with no support, no help. And I literally showed up at that office meeting, which is the first time I walked into that office after I had those files under contract. And people started coming up to me, and they saw my name on the board of like top agents for the month, that do that. Yep. And they're like, what'd you do? And I thought I actually did something wrong. And I was like, was I not supposed to put 3 homes in contract? Is it supposed to do more? Like, what's the deal here? And they're like, no, we want to know, like, that's like unheard of. How'd you do that? And I said, I remember turning around and asking the person, I said, well, what did you do all the last 30 days then? What'd you do with your time? What were we doing? And they're like, I said, I just work 12-hour days, 7 days a week. I said, what else is there? And people couldn't understand that. And you look back now and you can understand why people just don't naturally do that. But that's how I built. And so for the next 3 years, that's all I did. It was 7 days a week, 10, 15-hour days. There was no time, I didn't measure time. It was just I had to get shit done. And I just made sure that I went and did it. I also am inherently lazy when it comes to anything that anybody else can do. When it comes to physicality or meditation or anything that somebody can't do for me, I'm super laser focused. Yeah. When it comes to anything else that somebody can do outside of me, I naturally and inherently very lazy to it. So I want somebody else to do it. And so I actually, back in mid 2006, in the first 3 months, I started hiring an assistant. This was, remember, in 2006, the largest team, I think, volume-wise in the U.S. was like 50 million. Wow. So it's not like, that was like the largest team. That's not even like a blip on the radar now. But like so people didn't have teams. So I hired my assistant. I started hiring a buyer agent the first 6 months. No idea what I was doing. Nobody had teams or models. I just knew that somebody else could do it. And so that's ultimately the projection of it. And I literally just started doubling my business. I became the #1 agent in 24 months in the state. I ended up, within 3 years, I ended up becoming the Remax Associate of the Year inside of all of Remax for it. And this was all just in a small little Vermont. And then it just started blossoming from there.
Wow, that's awesome. I have a quick question. So based on all that, I think there's a super important thing that you said in the last the last time we talked with David Hill and now, where you actually stand guard at the front of your mind, right? It seems like I couldn't come into your life and just pour a bunch of negativity into you and let it sink in very deeply, right? Am I right about that?
Yeah, 100%.
So how much control do people actually have of what they allow to go into their mental, and how did you build that? Were you always with that? Yeah.
Yeah, to unpack that question. I mean, to answer it short, and I'll unpack it for you. Everyone has 100% control of anything that enters into your mind. Let me rephrase how I say this. I'm going to go a little deeper on this so you can follow me.
Yeah.
You don't have any control on what shows up in your mind. Let me just explain this. You can go as deep as you want inwardly and spiritually. Your mind's nature is to produce thoughts. Just like you don't have control of how many clouds show up in the sky, they're just there. But you do have control on how you deal with it. People when you're thinking about thinking or thoughts have a subject-object relationship. So when you're thinking of a thought right now, you are the one who's back here who sees the thought, right? If you didn't see the thought, it would just be, just like you are, which is why you can't see you. And so the thought is produced in the mind. It's just, instead of hearing it in language, instead of your heart produces vectors, which is emotions and feelings and the texture of life, your mind's nature is to produce thinking. That's all it does. It's one thought, next thought. I understand that there's breaks in between thought. And I always ask people, I said, how many thoughts have you had in the last 5 minutes? And they say 10. I said, well, how many of them do you still have right now? They said, well, none of them. And I said, great. So you know that you're not your thoughts, right? I think we all can agree that. However, the challenge that people fall into, and this is where the whole conversation, people talking about mindfulness and waking up. What waking up and mindfulness really mean, if people want to understand this, is just you first understanding that you are not your thoughts. You are the one who watches them. When you wake up, what you're waking up from is realizing you have become your thinking. And so people are so addicted to their mind that they actually have glued themselves. They're so close to it that their thinking pulls them in. It's like if there's a blender there, but until the blender is plugged in, there's no electricity to it. The blender is the thoughts in this analogy. The thoughts mean nothing until you until you plug it in, meaning that you take who you are in your consciousness and actually apply it and put it towards the thought. The minute you put you into the thought, you're lost. You're now in dream state. So what people mean by waking up is that you separate yourself and understand that you're always going to have thoughts. You can never stop them. Right? That's what I love about meditation. The first stage of meditation is people meditate and they go, man, I couldn't meditate because I had so many thoughts. And I go, perfect. And they're like, what do you mean? I go, because now you've realized you've just become aware of the incessant chatter that goes on in your mind. You ask a question, somebody else answers it inside you. You're the one witnessing all of that. And so when you ask the question, who's standing guard, your thoughts are just going to appear just out of mist, just like a bubble is produced from a little bubble machine. It just shows up. What you have control over is whether or not you touch the thought, whether or not you touch it. It's like at 9 o'clock at night, after you've had a glass of wine, there's cookies that are in the jar, right? The cookies are not you, and they're there though. You can still see them, but you have control on whether or not you eat the cookie. And what people would say is, well, I can't stop myself from the cookie. What you're saying is I've lost my ability to control or stay seated, and therefore I just found myself eating the cookie. It's the same thing with thinking. So if people want to stand guard, what they need to understand is they need to stop fighting with their mind and start to be and come from a place of just awareness that I see the thinking, I see it. There's a big difference between the analytical thinking mind and an insight, that aha movement. When you get that insight or that aha movement, it's a whole body visceral experience. I always call it like the conscious contact with the experience. It doesn't originate in your mind. It's a whole, when you get that, like, oh, that's what I'm going to do. It's not a thought first. It's a whole body experience. The only reason why people don't live more of their life that way is because they're so addicted to their thinking. I mean, if you were constantly looking at a movie on your screen, right, nonstop, until somebody stopped that screen, you wouldn't know that there's a whole other world around here. And that's how people are living their entire life glued to a TV, not even realize there's a whole other world. And that's what the whole conversation of waking up is.
That was deep.
Awesome.
So how did you develop this mindset over time? Or even to unpack that further and go back a few conversation topics ago, you like, I got into real estate, I started lead generating. Like, how did you know to do that? Because I feel like a lot of people don't realize, like, hire an assistant. Like, did you have a coach or a mentor or books, somebody guiding you, or did you just intuitively know what to do?
Well, at that stage of my life, hubris drove me a lot. I wanted to have money to prove to the world that I was better than them. And so the drive really actually stemmed from a self-centered place. and I wanted to prove to the world that way. I did go to a Howard Britton conference. By the way, I borrowed $8,000. If people are wondering, I borrowed $8,000 to start my first business. And then within the first 30 days, I took $4,000 of that and I went to a Howard Britton conference. So the value of applying and investing into yourself, I borrowed $8,000, took 4,000 of it in the first 30 days, or in the first 45 days, call it, invested into myself half of the earnings that I had, half the money that I had, I put into training. And then that is what gave me the path to go out there and hire an assistant. I heard the thing called buyer agents, which I didn't know about, which is still like starting to be a topic there. So I just learned a little bit about the direction that I needed to go in the next 12 to 18 months. And that kind of set me up for it. I didn't have a coach other than that, but that's what it was. And so then I just had this internal drive that I was going to prove to the world and prove to myself that I could go make money. And I'll tell you what happened with that. And it's just kind of interesting is when I was 26, so that was probably 3 years into real estate, I had this goal, and everyone has a different number, but I had this goal of $500,000 in net income. And once I hit $500,000 in net income, like there was supposed to be a party for me. There was supposed to be somebody coming down and giving me like this book that gave me this feeling that I was looking for because I had arrived when I hit this $500,000, right? Like it was going to be like they were going to hang placards up. They were going to have like a billboard, all this. This is like, I'm kind of being a little facetious, but that's kind of how I dramatized this in my mind. Like it was like, I'm going to arrive when I get to this number. And I hit it in my third year in real estate and in $500,000, right around $500,000 net income. And I was having a conversation with my mom, and every time she watches these or hears me say this, she's like, "I'm so sorry I made you feel that way." And I'm like, "No, you didn't." She's the most unassuming individual. She doesn't care about money at all. And I remember telling her, I'm like, "Hey, you know, I made about $500,000 this year." And she's like, "Oh, that's great. Can you pass the ketchup?" And I was like, and in that moment, I was like, people don't give a shit. They actually don't care. And the funny thing was, I wouldn't call it clinical depression. I just got a little depressed because I was like, well, hold on. If what I thought was going to give me all this joy and this feeling and the satisfaction and people were going to hug me because of who I was, if money wasn't going to do that, then what's the point? I didn't know how to fix it. And at that moment, I literally said, I'm going to go, this has to be an inward journey for me. And so 16 years ago, basically, 14 years ago, in that moment, I made a decision to go very deep inwardly. And so when you hear me talk about it now, this is 14 years of studying behavior, studying myself. And this is, visions and future selves. And then it's evolved to very deep spiritual work that I do now. But it goes in phases based on your maturity of your consciousness. And it's right, wrong, and different. Everyone's playing at your different levels. And I tell everybody, if you're working on yourself consciously, I applaud and honor what you're doing at whatever stage that is, because I was at every single stage that you could go through. And so for the last 14 years, it's been an inward journey. This is the crazy thing, though. It's kind of been an experiment. As I've gone inward, I've made my life about other people. It didn't always, I say that over 14 years. So it wasn't like one moment it was there. It was a gradual, you're getting a boat off the water and plane. Like it's a gradual thing that comes up until once it goes there. It's the same way kind of like my inner journey was, where it was much more of like this gradual, I kind of faked it. Then it was kind of starting to get real. And then over time, I started really making my life about other people. And the funny thing is the minute I really started making it, that was probably 4 or 5 years after I started going inward journey, my companies really started to take off. Within a couple of years after that, we hit $1 billion in sales. We hit, we had 4 or 5 major organizations. We're in the Fortune, Inc. 5,000 list, and number 42 for companies. We just started getting all these accolades and different things. And now we kind of wake up and we've got, 600 plus people in our organization and 30 locations around the country and from everything from healthcare campuses to real estate to coaching. I'm actually buying an organic hay and corn farm that I'm going to, for AHC Farm and Ranch, that we're doing a bunch of organic stuff. So we're just expanding to a whole bunch of different things. And again, it all started because I made this about an inner journey for me, which is why when people hear me talk, I always try to talk about the absolute truth, which is business is truly nothing but this conduit for our ability to work on ourselves. And if you approach it that way, you no longer realize that life's happening to you. It's just unfolding, and you get to experience the unfolding it. It's not about whether you like the experience. It's not about whether or not you want that experience to happen. If we took 10 of us that are watching this call right now, and we asked all 10 of us how we wanted the weather to be, there would be different people saying, I want it to rain, I want it to sun, I want it to be cloudy, I want it to be hot, I want it to be cold. So the poor world can't serve an individual. The world just unfolds, and then you can either choose to accept the unfolding of it, or you can choose to fight with it, which is why everyone's walking around suffering.
That's awesome. Have you bought a ketchup company and then go to your mom and be like, hey, Mom, I got a ketchup company. She'll be so happy.
Maybe Heinz will sell it to me. I mean, for discount. Got lycopene in it. It's a healthy product.
I have two quick questions. So I watched one of your videos and you mentioned how when you used to, right? I don't know. I think this video wasn't that long ago, but what you mentioned was how you set 3-year accomplishments for your goals, which I was like, usually it's 5 to 10, so 3 is pretty short, right? And then, so that's one. Just answer that one, and then we'll get to the other one.
Yeah. We use what's called a future self, and we actually created a tool for myself and for our own organization. And you can go to it. It's free. It's adamhergenrother.com/future. adamhergenrother.com/future. Maybe you can throw it in the show notes. And it's literally, it's a free service. You go in there and it's your future self. Each morning we've created a dev company that has created this so that every morning, if you filled this out, every morning it shows up in your inbox with an inspirational message from you with your future self, which is based on 6 different categories: spiritual, social, financial, professional, family, and then your financial aspect of it and physical. In those 6 different categories, and you write it out within 3-year increments as if it's already occurred. And every day that shows up in your inbox, so you don't have to think about it. So your goals are right staring you in front of you. And so that's why we developed it in 3 years, and you write it out as if it's already happened. And then you can write out specific weekly, daily, and monthly goals from your overarching where I'm going in 3 years. And I've done this for the last 11 years, and it's interesting you never know how life's going to unfold for you, but it ends up always unfolding, in a direction of where you're going on your future self, which I think is pretty cool. Yeah,
that is awesome, right?
So that's adamhergenrother.com/future.
Yep.
And then that's awesome. I think like it's almost like, if you shoot for the stars, you land on the moon. Or if you're shooting an arrow and you just shoot in an open field, or if you have a target, even if you don't hit the target, you're probably going to land somewhere in that direction, right?
Absolutely.
I think from the same video, what does at this point in your life, what does giving mean to you? And 14 years ago, what did giving mean to you?
14 years ago, giving meant, it wasn't the conversation, it was taking. It was, I would go into an office and say, what can I get from somebody? What can I get from a client? What can I get from my employees? What can I ensure they got paid for it? But it wasn't me about making it about them. It was making it about what Adam needed. And so I got really addicted to results, but I got addicted to results because I wanted the personal gain from them. And so now my life is different in the fact that I get very laser focused on results, but I've let go of all the outcome or the personal gain that comes from it. When it comes, I enjoy it and I accept it. It's the phrase that you hear a lot from me, which is need nothing and enjoy everything. And so when you need nothing, you're no longer suffering when something doesn't go your way. Yes, it may not, if you have to change your tire at 11 o'clock at night, you may not be happy, but you can have a sense of peace about it. If your business is struggling for a month or two, you're not going to be happy about it. It's not like you're going to sit there and allow it, but you can still have a peace about it. If you're lying on your deathbed, which at some point we all will, you may not be happy you're lying on your deathbed, but there can be a peace about you. And so there's an internal joy that can always be the residue of who you are. And then in the life, there's going to be ups and downs and trials and struggles. Some are going to be happy, some are going to be sad, some are all that. But you're just witnessing all of that. It's when you become all of those emotions. No wonder why you're up and down. When things are going well, I'm doing great. Of course you are. Didn't we stop and think about that? They're like, when the world unfolds the way I want it to, I feel amazing. No shit. What about all the other times when you don't? Like, you're going to suffer then? Because I can tell you, there's a lot of times it doesn't happen that way. There's a way your starting position can be, I wake up and I'm excited for life. I don't know what's going to happen for life. I'm excited for it, for whatever happens. And then whatever happens, you take. There's a really famous book called the Bhagavad Gita, and it's a very Old Testament in Hinduism, and it's kind of like their Bible, if you will. But it's it's a really good read. And one of the things in there, I'm not going to go into all of it, but it says, like, a yogi lets goodness comes when it comes, and when it departs, it departs. And when darkness comes, they let it come, and when it departs, it departs. And basically it goes on to say, like, this is a sojourner in the midst of the qualities of nature. And just as all the rivers and the seas and the lakes pour into the ocean, but leaving the ocean untouched just as it was, just the same as the yogi, which means that as an individual, you let all the experiences of the world pour into you, leaving you untouched, allowing you to experience the experience. And so whether it's a positive experience or a negative experience, that's only mind telling you that, because somebody's positive experience is somebody else's negative experience. So it's not the experience, it's how you are saying to yourself, that's what I like or I don't like. And like and dislike is the foundation for suffering. And I don't mean like, I like this shirt. I don't mean like that. I mean like these big overarching things in your life. Like, I need life to be a certain way. Well, that's a recipe for suffering. It just is. It's hard for people to really wrap their head around that. But if you ultimately if you want to play in the relative world, relative freedom, relative physicality, relative freedom, any of those things, go play with it. You can make your life relatively okay. And a lot of people do this. But if there's a yearning for authenticity to go deeper than that, for the absolute truth is you have to be okay with everything. The minute you're okay with everything, that's the absolute freedom. Imagine being able to walk around the world being undisturbed by anybody or anything that could ever happen. That's absolute liberation, self-realization, and absolute freedom.
That's awesome. What was the name of that book?
It's called the Bhagavad Gita. You just look up Gita, Gita.
Got it.
It's a Kushner and Arjunia, I'm like his name, having just a conversation about it. It's a really good book, though.
I'll Google it. I'll put it in the show notes. As my friend David Hill says, that went scuba deep. We got a Facebook question. Ron Carpenito watching on his birthday. Guys,
Happy birthday.
Probably. Happy birthday, Ron. So here's the question. What are some great ways to work on yourself for a journey like you're describing? So basically describe your inner journey and something that we can do on our own journey.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, because you asked me the question, from my experience, it started with physicality. That was kind of the first thing to start building discipline in my life, because self-mastery ultimately is overcoming that voice inside your head that says no, so you can actually watch the voice instead of becoming it. And that's my definition of self-mastery. So in order to gain more strength in self-mastery, just like you would become a better piano player, you have to work at it. This thing is hard. I tell everyone, people want this enlightenment factor or they want spirituality. What they really want is their vision of enlightenment, that somehow the world's going to be okay and unfold for them. That's not spirituality. Spirituality is the harder than making money. It's harder than any relationship, because you literally, as Jesus Christ said, you have to die before you're reborn. You literally have to die before you're reborn. And that death is extremely painful, which means what you're doing is you're letting go of this collage of images and thoughts and collections that you've put together on how the world needs to be for you to be okay. And you've built this structure up, and you spend 99% of your energy every day maintaining this structure. So in order to go deep work, you have to let go of that structure. However, you can't just let go of it. It's going to be a phase. So the first couple of things I tell people to do is start off in the morning with some sort of journaling. It can be a gratitude journal. It can be 5 things you're grateful for. You just start getting into a different mindset. Then do something that exercise-wise that makes you use your mind to strengthen it. Like, I wake up and exercise every day, and most days that I wake up, my mind goes, don't exercise. And I go, screw you, I'm exercising. Or here's another thing. When your alarm clock, if you set your alarm to get up at 5 a.m. and your alarm clock goes off, don't let that voice inside your head, the minute you become conscious, walk you out of that. If it does, you've just now created a new habit. That's what people don't understand. They're like, I love positive affirmations. I'm like, what about all the other affirmations you're doing every single moment? Like, every moment you wake up, your alarm clock goes off and you don't get up, that's an affirmation. Like, it's just you're affirming a thought. That's all it is. And they work, so you should be scared of that. And so basically, or just be aware of it. So all these small things every day, start with the small. And here's another one you can do if you want to do some deeper inner work. Low-hanging negative consequence things, like the weather, okay? Stop complaining about the weather. If it's, I can't believe it's raining. Just stop. Like, what's the point? You have no influence over that at all. If it rains, it's going to be great. We're going to make a mask. I don't know what we're going to do. If it's sunny, great. We're going to go outside and do it. Yeah, sure, you can have a lightness to it. Like, hey, it'd be fun if it's sun out there, but there should be no energy behind it, right? The other thing is traffic. Like, people get so caught up in traffic. Yes, if there's another route to take another route. If you can pass a car, pass a car. But if a car cuts you off or goes slow, you getting wound up by that just means that you got wound up by the emotion. It means that the emotion controls you and took you over. It took you out of your seat of consciousness and brought you into the moment, which is not where you want to be the one observing this. So these little things, we always teach people to go 3, 2, 1, relax. So the minute you start to feel yourself getting disturbed, which you all know what that means. It means the energy gets all messed up in your stomach or your chest or whatever it is. When somebody cuts you off, instantly go 3, 2, 1, relax. And if there's a lot of people in real estate listening to this, an agent's calling you on your phone, how many people have this happen last week? You see an agent's name on the phone and you get pissed off before you're even talking to them, right? I mean, come on, we all know that happens. Yeah, right?
Happened to me this morning.
Yeah, before you answer that phone, 3, 2, 1, relax. It's 3, 2, 1, relax, drop your shoulders, breathe out. You're spinning around on a planet in the middle of this galaxy. I'm pretty sure you can handle a phone call. So just remind yourself that I'm here to contribute. I'm not here to take, I'm not here to serve myself. I am here to contribute to the moment that's unfolding in front of me. If that's a phone call, then that's what it is. If that's a podcast, that's a podcast. You're contributing to the moment in front of you. So if you just start implementing these small things that start to disturb you, your kids yelling at you, something not going your way, an agent calling you, or a deal falls apart, any of these things, start with the smallest things and allow these things to work their way through you. When you feel yourself getting disturbed, 3, 2, 1, relax. And you may have to do 3, 2, 1, relax for 15 minutes, 20 minutes in the same moment. Just keep doing it over and over again. But I promise you what you're doing, here's the real deep part of this. The why you're doing this is because you're allowing the emotions trying to exit you. The only reason why you're disturbed is because you've stored some sort of energy pattern there, what we call samskaras. It's an ancient Sanskrit term from 2,000 years ago. It's called a samskara, and it's a circle. Every event that occurs has energy to it. You're all energy. Every thought you have is energy. Your body's put together by energy. Every event you're seeing outside is energy. So when an event comes in that you do not like early on, you store it. It's kind of like you push it away. Either way, you're not allowing the event to actually unfold. You're stopping the event. And that stopping of the event actually stores it in your stomach. It's like if you have a clean stream, you start putting rocks in it, you're going to dam up the stream. And so the reason why the circle is the most powerful form in history is because it's the only form that energy can stay seated but yet keep moving. It just keeps moving and moving and moving. So then something in the exterior world happens. It hits your stuff, which is why you feel disturbed. And it's just you hit an old energy pattern. When it hits your stuff, the energy goes, okay, Art, I'm trying to get this out. Let me get it out. And you go, no, I'm going to get kind of pissed off. And you just push it down even more. Like you have hands pushing it down even more. Emotions there's nothing wrong with emotions. You feel what you feel. Don't fight it. But the key is to sit with it. Allow the emotion to work its way through you. And if you can actually allow the emotion to work its way through you, here's the greatest gift. It's like a fortune cookie. The minute the emotion goes through you, it leaves you the clue that it was trying to give to you. And once you allow it to sit, so start with these small things that piss you off, 3, 2, 1, relax it, and allow the emotion to just make its way through you. And man, as it makes its way through you, you'll gain a different perspective and you have a huge sense of clarity when you start practicing this in your life.
That's awesome. What are your goals for the next 3 years? And then we can hit a couple questions on Facebook. I know some people have some questions.
Yeah. I mean, it's really supporting all of my organizations. It's not much different than what within 3 years, I mean, it's similar to what Gary Keller just did. I wrote an article for Inman about that, his move for being the executive chairman of KWX. At a smaller scale, it's more of me being executive chairman of Adam Hergenrother companies, and then putting somebody in charge of all of that, just like he did. And so that's kind of the 3-year kind of mark. And then it's I love training. I love helping folks. I love talking about absolute truth, which we do a lot in kind of spiritual circles. And so I'm looking to just continue to do a lot more of that and support our people in massive growth. I mean, all of our organizations with growth, and it's exciting to watch what they're doing.
That's awesome.
All right, we're going to go to a Facebook question. So Jeff Piquette, who I believe owns Piquette's in Providence, a restaurant, if you guys are that way. He says, billionaire, wow. What advice can you give a restaurant owners that's struggling right now or struggling to hold on?
I think you got to adopt. You got to stop fighting reality first. which sounds like if he's listening to this, he probably has. But if he hasn't, you might want to check internally to see, have I really stopped fighting what actually has occurred? People ask me this sometimes. They're like, well, do you think COVID should have happened? And I go, well, of course. And they're like, what do you mean? I go, because it did. Anything that's happened should have happened. The minute you say something shouldn't have happened that's happened, you're fighting reality, and that's a cause of suffering. And the only reason why I say that is because the minute you accept reality, you're able to actually improve your own level of clarity and perspective. Then you can see the avenue of what you need to do next. So each individual is going to be a little bit different based on the restaurant. We can get into tactical things you can do business-wise. But the first thing is am I centered and have I accepted reality? Whether that's somebody next to you that's dying, whether it's a business thing or whatever's happening in life, you first have to accept it, then act. I always tell people when they're going through really tough times, I say, let go, then fight. Because if you're going to fight anyways, but if you're fighting before you let go, you're fighting from the wrong place. Spirituality isn't about changing what you do. It's about changing the part of you that's doing it. And so the minute you let go, it gives you the clarity to then fight appropriately. Fight in harmony with how life is unfolding. Not just another word, fight, just taking action. So for Jeff, it would be checking myself. Have I let go and accepted reality? Check one. If I haven't, sit with it, journal it, whatever you need to do to kind of accept that point of view, then the next step will become clear. And that may be a takeout. That may be, renting part of your restaurant out. That may be trying to do outdoor seating. That may be doing a whole nother thing. That may be doing not restaurants and maybe another opportunity. It's going to be different for everybody. But the first thing is to stop, then get clarity, and then get a game plan for what that looks like, and then get laser focused on hitting that.
That's awesome.
Great stuff. Now, quick question about the $1 billion organization. Can you tell people, so is that $1 billion in sales and across how many industries and companies?
Yeah, we're way over that this year. That was a couple of years ago, but yeah, it's a combination of brokerages, expansion teams, real estate, holdings, coaching, training, book sales. All of our organizations add up to hitting that revenue.
So that's in revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. That's great.
That's awesome.
Congrats.
I got a question. This will be my last question.
Yeah, right.
In one of your videos, you talk a lot about communication in your relationship, personal, like with your, say your spouse. What is like clear communication mean to you when it's people that are at arm's length with you?
I think number one is it's going to go back to the same thing that I've always said is you have to first make sure that you are centered and clear. And before you have any conversation with anybody, you have to make sure that there's not a personal agenda around the conversation, whether it's in business or whether it's a personal relationship. If you have a partner that you have a relationship with where it's about, I need you to do this and I need to do that. That's a tough relationship to really be in. That's a need or contract relationship. So I'm very focused on with my wife or my partner, we're very clear on, yes, there's like, go pick up the kids, it's go do those things, but there's a lightness to it. Then we come together and actually are there to work on ourselves together. Most people come into a relationship to get something from somebody else. We come into our relationship, which took time, by the way, it wasn't always like this, to really come together in a relationship of I'm going to work on myself, you're going to work on yourself, and we're going to allow the space in the room for both of us to work on ourselves together while sharing this journey together. That's a different relationship. And I also take that same approach to everybody that's in my life, that it's different when you're an intimate partnership. It's different whether you have an intimate business partnership. And so whether you have your business partners, it's the same way. Art, you and I are going to go in business together, and we're going to use this as a way to get results. We're going to use this as a way to grow. We're also going to use this as a way to work on ourselves through all this. Because let me tell you, in business, things happen that you wouldn't sign up for, like 3 people leaving in a day or the 10 lawsuits. I mean, I heard Will Smith gets 15 lawsuits a year, right? Or KWRI gets 3 to 4 lawsuits a day. I mean, it's like you wouldn't sign up for all this stuff. They just happen. That's how you come together in a relationship, in a business, of using business as this conduit to grow personally, to grow spiritually, to grow consciously, whatever word makes sense for you. Words are just words, they're just definitions. It's how you really mean it. There's signposts. You have to actually experience it to experience it. It's like, how do you describe water to somebody who's dying of thirst? They need to experience water, right? And so the thing is really, when you get deep relationships, it's about first letting go of any personal agenda that you have in that relationship. It doesn't mean you can't have results focused. So people get lost. They go, well, how do I just make decisions in business? No. You make a ton of decisions in business. Make a ton of decisions in your personal life. But let go of the personal gain coming from that and then accept whatever comes to that. You may get $15 million in net income in a month. Awesome. Accept that. That's sweet grace. You may not, right? It doesn't matter. You just get very focused on the result, but you let go of the gain from it. Same thing in any relationship you have. Then as you get into these conversations, you actually make room for people to be authentic, to be real, and to be vulnerable with themselves so they can actually work on themselves together with you. And then you're making room for all that. You as the leader can be the example of that by always making room for other people to share things. If it disturbs you, if it disturbs you to the point where it's like, wow, that really hurt and that disturbed me, I need a few minutes. That's a powerful leader versus trying to just act out of anger or rage when somebody comes in there. Nobody will ever come to you again. And then over time, when people bring things to you, they just never hurt you. You're just like, those are just words. People could say whatever they want. It doesn't bother me. Because you already know those people that you talk to that care nothing about money and right, that don't care nothing about it. And you could tell them how much money you're making, how much your friend's making. And they're like, that's amazing. And there's zero energy around it, right? That's why people love going to babies, because there's zero negative energy around somebody else succeeding. It's like, you can succeed as long as you stay below my success. And that's how most people act. Because God forbid, I need to maintain this self-image over here. And if you're going to pass me, that's going to be a problem for me. So why don't you just stay over here? And it's like, that's not supporting somebody. Supporting is coming in and allowing them to have the room to work on themselves.
That's awesome. Thank you.
2 questions to follow up on that. How do people that are doing pretty successful in business but can't mentally get to the fact of getting leverage? What we mean by that specifically is hiring an assistant or employees, whatever business that you're in. So how do they mentally get over that and do it so they could grow their business? And then the second thing I've heard people say before, like, oh, what if they leave? And you just kind of mentioned this a little bit. What if they leave and they do better than me? How do you fight that and actually do what you did, is support them? What's the mindset?
Yeah. So the first question, I would tell everybody that if you want to build a business, it's going to be a bumpy road and you're going to have to learn about people. And so therefore you need to go hire somebody. I hired most of my people and I had no idea how I was going to pay for them. Literally had no idea. I was making 6-figure hires and I didn't have that much money in the bank. I just had no idea. So people think that like people that make hires are sitting on millions of dollars. That's just not the case. And now that coaching and being in so many entrepreneur circles and people that have big businesses with 30 employees or 50 employees are going like, we have got 60 days of cash in our bank. Like we could be out any moment. That's how people are living. Like people just don't have tons of money like Facebook lying around, right? Or Apple. And so you just have to be, that's why you also have to go out there and you say, I've got 15 grand in my bank. I can make a $60,000 hire and I have 3 months runway for them. Therefore, I'm going to spend a lot of time making the right hire, the highest probability I can to get a return. And when you hire the right person, you get time and money. And so that's why you have it. That's why you hold them very highly accountable. But most people hire the wrong person and don't hold them accountable. They don't have clarity and they end up hurting their organization instead of providing a benefit. And then they go, see, nobody can do this. Well, I always remind people, I go, how long did it take you to hone your craft? And they go, well, 15 years. I go, great. How long have you been hiring for and interviewing people and learning about people? 3 hours. I go, well, no wonder why you've made some poor hires. Like when I realized that I wanted my life to be about other people, I spent over $100 grand on investing into myself and personal development, NLP, every single Tony Robbins event. I went to Bain Henyon, broke down ABAs. I did every single thing I could to learn about myself and people so I could be a better leader of it. And so you have to make a commitment if you want to go make the first hire that it may not be the best hire, it may not be the right one, but you're going to learn a lot. And as you make it, you're just very clear on the expectations. If you buy a lawnmower, you're very clear the lawnmower should cut the grass in appropriate time. If it doesn't, you bring it back. Except for with people, we have like this mind block that if they're not working, like we just accept that somehow. That's the wrong way to, you have to be shrewd from a business standpoint. It doesn't mean you're rude, doesn't mean you don't care about the person, but there's the person and then there's business. And so in the business side, you get very clear in the results, and if they're not there, then you switch them out. Look, this happens every day in sports. It's so funny. Like if a quarterback is not producing for more than 2 or 3 games, the fans, the general manager doesn't have to do anything. The fans kick them out, right? They're like, get them out of there. And they have to follow suit. And then it's okay in that profession. But when business is your sport and you have to let somebody go, you can't do that. It's like, what's the difference? Like, I don't get it. It's yes, you probably made a bad hire and you got to work through there, and you should pay them a compensation plan that gets them back on their feet. And there's a lot of things you can do to support them. But at the end of the day, you have to make sure you have the right hires, and then you realize you have to make sure they're in the right seats of the bus. But you just have to do it. That's the first thing, is you have to commit that I'm going to make a path about leading through other people.
I agree. I don't think we've ever learned as much until we started building a team and hiring. And even though the first time it wasn't as successful as it is the second time around, the only way to really learn is by doing it.
Yes.
And second part of that question, how do they get over, or how do you get over the fact that people may leave you?
Yeah.
Or when they do leave you, because it does hurt.
Yeah, people do. People leave Facebook, they leave Apple, they leave Amazon. Big people, governor. The board sued Mark Zuckerberg. Imagine having your own board sue you for performance. These things happen every day, but when they happen in our world, somehow they feel personal. And it's like, it's not. Stop taking it personal. So for me, I'm very clear. If somebody comes into my organization, I'm going to work with them as hard as I can and support them. If the time for them is to leave, then I help them pack and I get them to leave. And I just make peace with that. It's, you do what you can, you build moats around people, you try to keep people to stay. But at the end of the day, if they're going to leave, it's time for them to go, and I high five them, give them a hug, and I support them any way that I can. But when people are in your organization, you make a commitment for those 2 or 3 years or whatever, or 5 years or 15 years to work on them, to work in the relationship, to do these things. Because at the end of the day, when they're 50 or 60 or 70 years old and you made the biggest impact on their life for the 2 or 3 years, they're going to look back and go, man, I had this job one time, it didn't work out, but this dude, Art, right? Man, he really made such a big impact on my life. So what do you want?
Yeah. Who are your mentors? Who are the people that you follow and look up to that help you kind of hone your mindset in your business acumen?
Yeah. Well, Michael Singer from Untitled Soul or Surrender Experiment is a great dude. He's a great mentor of mine. I love anything vesting wise, Warren Buffett, just because he actually does. He basically, Warren Buffett or Berkshire Hathaway is basically KWX. Like, people just don't understand. Seriously, Warren Buffett just buys companies and he holds people in there and he makes some adjustments to it. That's all. He's a holding company for a whole bunch of companies. That's literally what he is. It's the same thing as Alphabet. Alphabet just owns Google and a whole bunch of other companies.
Yeah.
So to me, like, that's the role that I want to play in business, is to just own a bunch of companies that have individual leadership teams and built up there, and then having an overall brand that supports all of them. So Warren is that. And then obviously Gary Keller, I wouldn't be where I was today with him not, taking me underneath his wing 10 years ago and really working with me on, on a monthly basis for 4 or 5 years. I flew down there almost once a month, meeting with Gary personally or with a very small group of people. And I learned so much from him on how to think and how to be a business individual, and from that side of things. And I have I had a fitness coach and different things. So I have different coaches for different parts of my life.
How do people find mentors and leaders to look up to, or people to follow when they say they want to be in a mentor relationship and they just say they're in a much worse place than you are, or even I am, and they're like, I don't know anybody. Nobody around me is doing well. Like, they're just not in a good position to find anybody to mentor them. What do they do?
Well, I think that's a little bit of an excuse, because I think if you really want to find somebody to mentor, you can go find them. There's plenty of people out there that are willing to give their time, and very successful people didn't get there because they did it in isolation. They realized that they had a lot of people that helped them. I found that most billionaires that I've reached out to are more than happy to sit down with you. And they're just willing. You just got to ask. So if you really feel like that, I would ask yourself, are you really being pulled to this negativity? And do you really want to be free of it? Because if you do, you'd find a way. People are resilient people. Like, how does a drug addict always get drugs? They find a way to do it. I don't know, this analogy is weird, but they do, don't they?
Right.
They do. If they just took that same drive to like profits, they could. Whether, you could take somebody like Hitler. He went and did some horrible things, but man, the guy figured out how to do it. People figure out things if you have the hunger to do it. So if somebody says, I really want to find mentorship, go start reading books, go join your club. There's so many different things you could do that will just lead down the path to opening up one of those relationships. You just have to have the hunger to go do it. It doesn't show up in your lap. That's what people think, is mentors aren't going around there going, hey, I'm going to grab somebody from the street. They're looking for somebody to go to them and say, I've listened to every one of your podcasts. I've read your books. Before I've like Michael Singer is a great example of this. And for years I was like, I need to come visit him. And he just kind of ignored. And finally he was like, yeah, listen to enough of your stuff, blah, blah, blah. He'll meet with you for a day. And right, it's just, you just find a way to get these things done. And I think anybody that really wants something like that can find a way to do it.
All right. Best business book recommendation.
I love Ben Horowitz's books. Have you read any of his stuff? The Hard Things About Hard Things. It's just it's an awesome book about business. It's there. 11 Rings by Phil Jackson. If you haven't read that, is an awesome business book because Phil Jackson's actually very spiritual, and he does a good job of kind of bringing spirituality into basketball players, which they were kind of like, like, what is that? Shoe Dog by Phil Knight's a great book as well, business wise. So I think, and the One Thing is great too. If you've never been exposed to that, that's just a really good business because it gets you to concentrate on there. The best personal development book, if you're going to ask me that question,
You're reading my mind now.
Yeah. Well, because they're just so drastically different, right? But for me, there's two books. They're both by Michael Singer. It's The Untethered Soul and then The Surrender Experiment. Both he wrote.
I read that book, The Untethered Soul.
Michael, the reason why I like Michael is because he's a very conscious, spiritual individual, but he also built a $3.2 billion company by letting go of it. So and you don't know that about him. He's just a guy a yogi lives in the woods and teaches, and he's just amazing. But he's been on Oprah. Tony Robbins had him on his thing. He doesn't do any of that stuff, but they just reached out to him. So it's pretty cool. Those two books.
That is pretty cool. And you have your own book, right? Called The Founder and the Force.
Yeah, The Founder and the Force Multiplier. It's about the relationship, their strategic partnership between an EA and any executive or manager or founder and visionary. And, it's done very well. It's a 6-time bestseller and people seem to enjoy it. So if you want it, we got it on Audible. You can go to Amazon and buy it through there as well too.
I'm gonna get it. This was a great interview. How do people get more of your stuff, and if they want to do more information and dive deeper with all your great content?
I mean, AdamHergenrother.com. AdamHergenrother.com is really the site that produces everything. You talk about we do about 100 free trainings a year, so you can sign up to see those things. And if you like this conversation, I have a podcast that we talked about in the beginning called Business Meets Spirituality. And it's Hallie, my chief of staff, and I who tackle some of the tough business questions and things that happen in there. And it's just her and I. She asks a lot of pointed questions in the interviews, and people seem to enjoy that as well too. So if you want to go subscribe to that, we'd love to have you listen.
All right, awesome. Dave, you got any final questions, comments?
Yeah. What questions? First of all, thank you. That was awesome. And second of all, what questions did we not ask that we probably should have asked?
There's always, the quality of your life's determined by the quality of questions. You can always ask more questions. I think maybe if I was going to answer the question too, is kind of what does your day look like? And for me, it's because I think it sets up so much in success. I spend about 4 hours every morning in personal development. It didn't always operate that way, but I spend about 4 hours a day in personal development. And that seems like a lot, but when I first started, I got up at 8 o'clock and got into work, and now I got up at 3:45 this morning and was just rolling. And so that's all, journaling, meditation, exercise, books, whole series of that. I've written all out what my morning routine looks like. Actually, our last episode of the podcast talks about a day in the life of me. And so we do a really good job of breaking that down if you're interested in that.
I'll check it out. I'll put the podcast in the show notes. I know you have a hard stop at 10:30, so we certainly appreciate your time and all the great wisdom that you bestowed on our audience and us.
Thank you,
Adam.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate what you're doing.
All right. See you later.
Yeah. That was fire. Woo!
That was good, man.
That was good.
Some heat.
Hey, guess what? That book he wrote, The Founder and the Force?
Yeah.
He's the founder, but there's a force, and that's coming tomorrow. Woo!
Tomorrow we're interviewing Hallie.
Hallie, yeah. Hallie's his chief of, I don't know.
We're gonna get the scoop on behind the scenes, what it takes to be, because she does a lot for him, right? She's been with him for a long time.
Hallie,
we'll find out tomorrow.
She serves as chief of staff to the founder and CEO of Adam Hergenrother Companies. She's also the co-author of The Founder and the Force.
Wow.
So, Yeah, it's gonna be
Yeah,
fun.
man. So you guys can do whatever you want to do. I remember when we were kids and Adam and I were like hanging out, and I was like, "Hey, man, you know, one day you can run $1 billion enterprise." And he's like, "Stop it, man. You're such a good friend. I can't believe you tell me this." And like, look at the guy now.
All right, any last words of wisdom?
I don't know. There's a lot, man. 4 hours a day on personal development. Dude, I wake up at 6 and I do like a couple. This guy's waking up at 4. I like the fact that he said he spent over 100,000 on personal development. That's crazy. Like, we went to Tony Robbins seminars, but I didn't go to the $25,000 class. You know what I mean? I was like, four grand, buddy? Come on, man. You're killing me.
Dabbling and diving deep in, scuba deep.
And then the other thing was, like, essentially what it's coming down to is not caring what anybody like, not letting anybody's negativity sink into what you're going to do with your life. Like, you're going out there, you're doing what you're doing, and, like, stay in your lane and do what you do.
Boom.
All right.
Mic drop. All right, I'll see you tomorrow for the follow-up.
You're looking good. I like that shirt. See ya.
Peace.